This is a man's world. If I would do anything to me.
But tonight, James Brown was sentenced to 6 years in prison, plus 5 years probation and a $6,000 fine. Earlier,
What do we really know about James Brown's death? Was there more to his passing than what was shared with the world? James Brown, the godfather of soul, lived a life full of fame and drama. But did he take a terrible secret with him to the grave?
I showed up and there was 6 padlocks on the gate and there was a car parked in front of the padlock.
What was he hiding? And why has it left people asking questions even today? Could the truth change how we see him forever?
This is a man's world.
James Brown was one of the most famous and influential musicians in history. Born on May 3, 1933 in Toccoa, Georgia, James started out singing gospel music. He soon became known for his powerful voice and energetic performances. Over his 50-year career, he was given many names, like Mr. Dynamite, the Godfather of Soul, and the hardest-working man in show business. His music changed the world, especially the way people think about rhythm and soul music. In the 1950s, James Brown joined a group called the Famous Flames. This is when he became a star. With songs like Please, 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 and Try Me, James built a name for himself. His energy and passion on stage made him stand out. By the 1960s, James was a household name. His live album, Live at the Apollo, became one of the most famous albums ever. And hits like I Got You and Papa's Got a Brand New Bag made him even more famous. But James didn't just stop with rhythm and blues. In the late 1960s, he began to change the sound of his music. He focused on creating new rhythms that were simpler but stronger. This led to the birth of funk music, a genre that became very popular in the 1970s. Songs like Get Up Sex Machine and The Payback are great examples of his funk style.
If I would do anything to me.
Brown was known for being tough on his band. If they messed up during a performance, he would fine them. It wasn't just a warning, it was a real penalty. The fines were quick and simple. For example, if someone made a mistake, James Brown might look at them and say, "That's 15," or "That's 20." It was like a game for him, but with real money on the line. The fines could be as small as $5 or as big as $30, depending on how serious the mistake was. The band members knew they had to stay on point or it would cost them. Imagine making a mistake and then seeing James Brown's eyes on you. You'd be thinking, "Oh no, there goes $30. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect for the music and the performance. James Brown wanted perfection from his band, and he made sure they stayed focused. His strict rules helped make his shows legendary, and the band learned to always be on their toes.
but tonight, James Brown was sentenced to 6 years in prison, plus 5 years probation and a $6,000 fine. Earlier,
But James's life was filled with ups and downs, including legal troubles that grabbed headlines. In 1988, James Brown was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Why? He carried a deadly weapon, tried to run away from the police, and drove under the influence of drugs. It all started when he burst into an insurance office near his workplace, waving a shotgun. He shouted that strangers were using his bathroom. By then, rumors about his drug use, especially PCP, were already swirling.
a jury found him guilty of failing to stop when signaled by a law enforcement officer and 2 counts of aggravated assault. But this is just the latest chapter.
When the police arrived, things got even crazier. Brown jumped into his truck and sped away, leading the officers on a wild chase across Georgia and South Carolina. He tried to ram police cars and they had to shoot out his tires. Even after losing 2 tires, Brown kept driving for 6 more miles on the rims. This dramatic incident became a key scene in the 2014 movie Get On Up, which told the story of Brown's life.
He had a conviction in February of this year for simple assault and battery that involved a police officer. In July of this year, he pled guilty to resisting arrest under the A section in South Carolina, meaning a lesser resisting arrest, unlawful carrying a pistol, and no contest to possession of PCP.
This wasn't Brown's first run-in with the law. He had a tough childhood in South Carolina, growing up poor. At age 15, he was sent to prison for breaking into cars. But even in jail, music was his passion. He sang in the prison choir and started a band when he got out. His determination and talent helped him rise to the top, becoming a pioneer in soul and R&B music. His influence reached stars like Michael Jackson and Mick Jagger. He was nicknamed the hardest working man in show business. And for good reason, his performances were electrifying. However, Brown's success couldn't keep him out of trouble. The 1980s were especially rough for him. In 1985, the IRS seized his 62-acre property because he owed taxes. Brown served half of his 6-year prison sentence and was released in 1991. But trouble followed him. In 1998, he was arrested again for firing a rifle at his South Carolina home and leading police on another chase. This time, he was sent to a drug rehab program.
The judge was even handed a note saying the bailiff wanted to speak in Brown's behalf, and moments later, 74-year-old bailiff George N. Brown did so.
But his struggles with addiction weren't over. Now, did you know that both James Brown and Joe Tex had a feud that got so bad it almost ended in murder? Yes, you read that right. James Brown once tried to shoot Joe Tex with a shotgun. Along the way, several people were injured, and the story has become one of music's wildest tales. The rivalry started way back in the 1950s when both singers were signed to King Records. Joe Tex had written a song called Baby You're Right and recorded it.
Oh, yes, I love you. I want to hug you.
A year later, James Brown took the song, changed the lyrics and music, and released it as his own. To make things worse, he gave himself credit as a co-writer. Imagine how Joe Tex felt seeing his song turned into a hit without getting the proper recognition. But the drama didn't stop there. James Brown also got involved with Joe Tex's ex-wife, B. Ford. The two even recorded a song together called You've Got the Power.
I need you, darling. You got the power to love.
Afterward, James sent Joe a letter saying he didn't want B anymore, and Joe could have her back if he wanted. Joe wasn't having it. He clapped back with a diss track called You Keep Her, where he openly mocked James.
You keep her because, man, she belongs.
The tension exploded at James Brown's big homecoming concert in Macon, Georgia. Joe Tex opened the show and decided to mock James right on his turf. He wore a raggedy cape, pretending to struggle with it, rolling on the floor and yelling, "Please, somebody help get me out of this cape." It was a clear jab at James Brown's famous cape routine. James wasn't laughing. An eyewitness described Joe Tex's performance that night as a complete mockery of James. Joe acted like he was stuck in his cape, mimicking James's dramatic style. It was all meant to embarrass James during his big night, and it worked. James lost his temper, and the after-party turned into chaos. After the concert, things took a shocking turn. At an after-party at Club 15, James showed up, and according to some witnesses, he wasn't just there to talk. Reports suggest James Brown brought not one, but 2 shotguns with him. Witnesses claim he stormed into the club where Otis Redding and his band were playing, looking for Joe Tex. What happened next is almost unbelievable. Witnesses said James started shooting, hitting 6 or 7 people before jumping into his tour bus to escape. To make matters even stranger, someone from his team handed out $100 bills to calm everyone down, including those who were injured. Johnny Jenkins said 7 people got shot that night. It was chaos. People like Johnny and Otis Redding hid behind a piano, trying to stay safe. Later, someone went around giving each injured person $100 to keep quiet about what happened. And just like that, the story died down. In 1972, James Brown made a song called Funky Side of Town.
Well, people, get on down.
In it, Bobby Bird and Hank Ballard mention Joe Tex, another soul singer. Brown dismissively says, "Who?" A clear diss. James Brown somehow walked away from that night without facing the law. Meanwhile, Joe Tex continued his career until he passed away from a heart attack in 1982. Brown might be the godfather of soul, but he also had a fiery temper that led to some shocking moments.
He had a conviction in February of this year for simple assault and battery. That involved a police officer. In July of this year, he pled guilty to resisting arrest under the A section in South Carolina, meaning a lesser resisting arrest, unlawful carrying a pistol, and no contest to possession of PCP.
James was also accused of swinging a knife at a utility worker and holding him against his will. The worker had come to fix a power outage at Brown's home. After entering the property, Brown allegedly threatened the worker, claiming he was a government agent. The worker said Brown then came at him with a steak knife. However, the utility company said there was no issue with Brown's electricity. Brown's lawyer declined to comment on the accusations. This isn't the first time Brown has faced legal trouble.
Your fans will have read all about this, James. Aren't you concerned about that?
No, I'm concerned because there's nothing wrong.
And what are you going to say to your fans when they ask you some questions about it?
I'm going to say I feel good.
In 2005, Jacques Hollander filed a lawsuit claiming that Brown raped her in 1988 while threatening her with a shotgun. Hollander said the attack happened after she had been working for Brown, assisting with public relations, in exchange for his help with her songwriting career. She recalled meeting Brown and his lawyer, Albert Dallas, in April 1988 at Brown's office in Augusta, Georgia. After their meeting, Brown allegedly told Hollander to ride with him to view a customized car. While walking to her car, Hollander saw Brown carrying what looked like a shotgun. She assumed he had it for protection and got into his vehicle. However, things soon took a disturbing turn. Brown drove erratically, ignoring her request to slow down. Hollander described him as acting paranoid, foaming at the mouth, and speaking incoherently. After exiting the highway, Brown took her to a deserted property in South Carolina. He allegedly threatened her with a shotgun and sexually assaulted her. For hours, he reportedly beat and mentally tortured her before returning her to the office. Brown allegedly told Hollander that if she spoke about the attack, he would have her killed. In 2000, Hollander was diagnosed with Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder that can affect the thyroid. It wasn't until 2003 that a doctor connected her condition to the trauma she experienced in 1988. This delay in discovering the link to her disease became a key point in her case. She argued that the time for filing a lawsuit should only start when she discovered the connection between the attack and her illness, which was well after the incident occurred. Brown's defense, however, argued that Hollander's claims were barred by the statute of limitations. In Illinois, a lawsuit for personal injury must be filed within 2 years of the injury. The defendants claim that because the alleged attack happened in 1988 and Hollander did not file her lawsuit until 2005, her claims were too late. Hollander, on the other hand, argued that the discovery rule should apply. This rule states that if a person does not realize the extent of their injury right away, the time to file a lawsuit doesn't start until they discover the injury or its cause. They also argued that due to threats made by Brown, she felt too scared to come forward sooner. Ultimately, the court sided with James and dismissed the case. The judge ruled that Hollander's claims were too late, as she should have known the harm caused by the events in 1988. This decision highlights the challenges of bringing a case after many years, especially in sensitive and complex situations like sexual assault and abuse.
I haven't even got to see his body yet. Well, I've given my life's blood for this man for 10 years. We have a child. I love him with all my heart. I'm dying here without him. It's killing me, and I can't even see his body.
James was married 4 times, though only 3 of his marriages were legally valid. His first marriage was to Velma Warren. They had a son together, but they separated after over 10 years and finally divorced. Despite their divorce, they remained good friends until his death. His second marriage was to Deidre "Dee Dee" Jenkins in 1970. They had 2 daughters, but their relationship was troubled. Brown's daughter later shared that there was domestic abuse, and they later separated. They eventually divorced in 1981. Brown's third marriage was to Adrienne Lois Rodriguez. This marriage was filled with conflict, including complaints of domestic abuse. Adrienne once accused him of assault, claiming he shot holes in her $35,000 mink coat. She later dropped the charges. Rodriguez filed for divorce, citing cruelty, but they later reconciled. Despite these issues, they had 3 children together, Terry, Teddy, and Larry. Even after they separated in April 1994, people remained interested in their relationship. Sadly, she passed away in 1996 at the age of 45. Less than a year after her death, Brown married for the fourth time. He hired Tommy Ray Heine to sing in his band, and they had a wedding ceremony in 2002 when Brown was 69 and Heine was 33. In 2004, at age 70, Brown was arrested for domestic violence against his fourth wife. However, this marriage was never legally recognized, even though Heine claimed to be his fourth wife.
I showed up and there was 6 padlocks on the gate and there was a car parked in front of the padlock.
When James Brown died, there was a lot of confusion and controversy about his marriage to Tommy Ray Heine. It turned out that Heine was still married to another man, Javed Ahmed, from Bangladesh, when she married Brown. Heine said that Ahmed had married her just to get a green card. She claimed that their marriage was supposed to be annulled, but it didn't happen until April 2004. This was a big problem because it meant her marriage to Brown might not have been legal. To prove her marriage to Brown was real, Heine showed a marriage certificate during an interview on CNN with Larry King. But she didn't show any court records that would show her marriage to Brown was legal, or that her marriage to Ahmed had been annulled before she married Brown. James Brown's lawyer, Albert Buddy Dallas, said Brown was upset when he found out that Heine had kept her earlier marriage a secret. Brown wanted to get his marriage to Heine annulled. Dallas also said that even though Heine's marriage to Ahmed was annulled, Brown and Heine's marriage was not valid under South Carolina law because they did not remarry after the annulment. In 2003, Brown made a public announcement in the magazine Variety that he and Heine were separating. The notice included a photo of Heine, Brown, and his son, James II, at Disney World. For years, there were battles in court about whether Heine could be considered Brown's widow. In 2015, a judge ruled that Heine was Brown's legal widow for the purpose of dividing his estate. The judge decided that her marriage to Ahmed was invalid, and Brown had stopped trying to annul his marriage to Heine. However, in 2020, the South Carolina Supreme Court said that Heine was not legally married to Brown because she never annulled her marriage to Ahmed before marrying Brown. The court ruled that Heine had no right to any part of Brown's estate. This decision caused more confusion about who would get Brown's money and belongings after his death.
Actually, I asked my brothers and sisters, would they like to write a book with me? That was one of the first things because I felt like because there's such a long range, from my oldest brother to me, that we would all have different opinions, and in different areas of Dad's life.
James had many children over the years. He acknowledged having 11 children, including 5 sons and 6 daughters. Tragically, 2 of these children passed away while James was still alive, leaving a deep impact on him. James's first son, Teddy Brown, was born in 1954 to his first wife, Velma Warren. Teddy grew up in a family where music was at the heart of everything, as his father's career was taking off. Sadly, Teddy's life was cut short when he died in a car accident in 1973, just 19 years old. His death was a devastating blow to James and the entire family. Another heartbreaking loss came years later with the death of Venetia Brown, James's daughter with soul singer Yvonne Fair. Venetia, born in 1964, followed in her father's footsteps, performing with him on stage and sharing his energetic dance moves. But in 2018, Venetia passed away after complications from pneumonia. In addition to his children, James had 8 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. But James's family life wasn't without its challenges. DNA tests revealed that James Brown also had several children outside of his marriages. One of the first confirmed was LaRonda Pettit, born in 1962. She grew up to become a flight attendant and a teacher. Another alleged son, Michael Dion Brown, was born in 1968, though James never officially recognized him, despite legal battles over paternity. In his later years, James even wanted a DNA test to confirm the paternity of his son, James Brown Jr., born in 2001. The test confirmed that James Brown Jr. was indeed his biological son. Was James Brown's death really natural?
I want to get now to this exclusive CNN investigation that raises questions about the death of James Brown, the godfather of soul.
Sadly, James passed away on Christmas Day in 2006. But even after all these years, people are still asking, was his death really from natural causes? Some believe there's more to his sudden death than meets the eye. Before Brown died, he had been hospitalized on December 23rd. Doctors noticed signs of heart failure and a mild heart attack. His doctor, Dr. Marvin Crawford, thought these were treatable problems. In fact, Brown seemed to improve quickly after receiving treatment, and by Christmas Eve, it looked like he might leave the hospital. But by 1 a.m. the next day, James Brown was dead. Dr. Crawford was shocked. He never expected his patient to die so suddenly. He even raised questions about what went wrong in that hospital room. But that wasn't the only strange part. Charles Bobbitt, Brown's personal manager, was with him in his final moments. Bobbitt said that Brown told him his chest felt like it was on fire. Shortly after, he lay down and passed away. Bobbitt was with him when he died, and his sudden death seemed odd. Even the doctor who signed Brown's death certificate didn't believe he died from natural causes. He felt something wasn't right. James Brown's friend Andre White was also at the hospital. White had been with Brown for most of his stay, but had left for a while. After hearing about Brown's death, White came back to the hospital and spoke to one of the nurses. The nurse told him that a man who didn't belong to Brown's usual group had visited right before his health took a sudden turn for the worse. The nurse also pointed to something strange: residue in Brown's medical tube. She took a sample of his blood and gave it to White. White kept that vial of blood, hoping one day it could be tested to find out if something more happened that night. He wants to know what really happened to his friend. In addition, some people close to Brown said he had been planning to leave South Carolina before his death. They believe he wanted to distance himself from his lawyer and accountant, who he had been unhappy with. But it seems like those plans never came to be. At least 13 people have questioned how James Brown really died and want answers. Before James Brown's death, there were reports that he had been planning to move to New York. His manager, Frank Kopsidas, told CNN that Brown didn't want many people to know about his plans because he was worried his accountant, Cannon, and a business partner named Dallas would try to stop him. Brown's decision to move to New York could have changed his business relationships and his life. However, something even more shocking came to light after Brown's death. Cannon, who had been Brown's accountant, was found to have illegally taken over $8 million from the singer. He used some of that money to build a mansion in Honduras. In 2010, Cannon was charged with the crime and received a 10-year suspended sentence after entering an offered plea, which means he didn't admit guilt, but accepted the punishment. Cannon had also been a trustee of Brown's finances, meaning he had control over a portion of Brown's income, which he could use for management purposes. Throughout his career, James Brown had 17 songs that reached #1, one on the Billboard R&B charts. He holds the record for having the most songs on the Billboard Hot 100 that never reached #1. Despite this, his music was loved by millions and heavily influenced many artists, especially in hip-hop and other genres. He was inducted into many halls of fame, including the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,